The Sugar Cube White House. Cub Scouts, den mothers, and an ambitious project. In the gentle, sunlit living rooms and kitchen nooks of Danfield, New York during the early 1960s, the ordinary rituals of suburban motherhood could, with astonishing suddenness, transform into grand theatrical spectacles of optimism, ingenuity, and impending chaos. Nowhere is this transformation more delightfully realized than in the opening movements of the composite script under review, where Lucille Ball's Lucy Carmichael and Vivian Vance's Vivian Bagley preside over Cub Scout Den 8 as den mothers of uncommon zeal. The boys have completed a project of such improbable ambition that it instantly elevates the episode from the realm of everyday domestic comedy into a celebration of pure, unfiltered American inventiveness. The last chimney has been glued into place upon a replica of the White House constructed entirely of sugar cubes. The structure stands complete, and the moment of collective admiration arrives with the quiet authority of a curtain rising upon a stage already vibrating with possibility. Lucy's first command is characteristically theatrical. "Everybody step back so we can get a good look at it," she declares. And the camera of the mind's eye immediately frames the tableau, a group of small boys in their Cub Scout uniforms, two women whose faces register equal parts pride and residual exhaustion, and at the center of it all, an architectural confection that somehow manages to look both fragile and monumental. The dialogue that follows is a masterclass in the economical establishment of character and theme. "Boy, this is neat," one of the scouts offers, and Lucy replies with the proprietary glow of a creator who has guided the enterprise from first cube to final chimney. "I'll bet this is the only replica of the White House in the world made entirely of sugar cubes." The line is delivered with Ball's trademark mixture of absolute conviction and barely suppressed glee. It is not merely a boast. It is a declaration of uniqueness that will, in true Lucy fashion, become both the project's greatest strength and the seed of its eventual near destruction. Vivian's response is equally telling. "It looks just like the real one," she agrees, and then with the affectionate precision that defines her partnership with Lucy throughout the series, she notices a small human detail that humanizes the entire enterprise. There's Caroline sliding down the banister. The reference to Caroline Kennedy, the real-life first daughter then occupying the actual White House, anchors the fantasy in the concrete cultural moment of the Kennedy administration. In 1963, the White House was not merely a government building. It was a symbol of youthful energy, cultural sophistication, and national optimism. By placing a sugar cube version of Caroline upon a banister, the Cub Scouts, and by extension the writers, gently insert themselves into that national mythology. The laughter that follows is warm rather than mocking. It is the laughter of people who recognize the charm of children attempting to participate in the great pageant of American history, with the materials available in a suburban kitchen. Yet the scene is not allowed to rest in pure admiration. Lucy's sudden realization that something has been forgotten, "Oh, I forgot something," and the subsequent military-style call to attention, "Men attention," reintroduce the organizing energy that makes Lucy Carmichael such a compelling comic force. She is never content merely to complete a project. She must ritualize its completion, turn it into a ceremony, and almost inevitably expand its scope far beyond original intentions. When Cub Simmons, clearly a phonetic rendering of a scout's name in the transcript, asks whether the weekend trip to Washington will include a visit to the real White House, the Washington Monument Congress, the Pentagon, and the Lincoln Memorial, Lucy's answer is expansive: "We're going to see everything." The line is spoken with the breezy confidence of a woman who has already decided that the universe will rearrange itself to accommodate her plans. Only when Cub Bagley inquires about meeting the president does reality briefly intrude. "Oh, I'm afraid not. He's too busy." "Oh, rats," Lucy replies, the final interjection, carrying the authentic disappointment of a child who has just been told that the circus will not, after all, come to town. It is at this precise moment that the classic Lucy engine begins to turn. Vivian, ever the voice of measured practicality, reminds her friend that one cannot simply request an audience with the President of the United States because one happens to wish to say hello. There must be a reason. Lucy's eyes light with the familiar spark of inspired improvisation. "Hey, I know. People are always presenting him with things, aren't they? Well, I'm sure Jackie could find room on the mantle for a sugar cube White House." The reference to Jacqueline Kennedy is both culturally precise and characterologically perfect. Lucy does not think in terms of security protocols or presidential schedules. She thinks in terms of domestic hospitality and the universal language of handmade gifts. The Sugar Cube White House is no longer merely a Cub Scout project. It has become a diplomatic offering, a gesture of goodwill from the children of Danfield to the first family. Vivian's mild protest. Oh, now Lucy is met with the unassailable logic that has powered so many of Ball's greatest schemes. Well, one good thing, Viv. I'm pretty sure they won't have one just like it. The line is pure Lucy, simultaneously self-aware and utterly undeterred. She knows the plan is improbable, even slightly absurd, yet she also knows that its very uniqueness constitutes its strongest argument. In the world of the Lucy Show, uniqueness is currency, and Lucy spends it with the confidence of a woman who has never once doubted that the world will eventually recognize the brilliance of her ideas. The scene then pivots with the effortless grace of classic sitcom construction, from the finished model to the practical question of how one actually contacts the White House. Lucy's decision is instantaneous and absolute. What are you going to do? I'm going to call the White House. Vivian's deadpan reply, I can only hope that you mean the White House cafeteria, establishes the tonal contrast that will govern the remainder of the sequence. Vivian is the audience's surrogate, the voice of reasonable doubt. Lucy is the force of nature that will steamroll that doubt into submission. When Lucy picks up the telephone and instructs the operator, would you please get me the White House? No, I don't mean the White House cafeteria. I mean the White House in Washington, D.C. The audience is invited into the delicious tension between the ordinary suburban living room and the most powerful residence on Earth. The telephone number she offers, Klondike 54320, is a small masterpiece of period detail, grounding the fantasy in the rotary dial reality of the early 1960s. As the connection is made and Lucy identifies herself as Mrs. Lucy Carmichael Den, mother of Cub Scout Den 8 in Danfield, New York, the script achieves a perfect balance of the grandiose and the domestic. She does not claim to represent a powerful organization or a political constituency. She represents a group of small boys who have spent weeks carefully gluing sugar cubes into the shape of the executive mansion. The gift she proposes to present is not a valuable artifact or a political endorsement. It is a fragile, edible, handmade object that carries within it the pure enthusiasm of childhood. When she explains that the replica is made entirely out of sugar cubes, the phrase lands with the weight of a diplomatic credential. In Lucy's mind, the materials of the gift are its highest recommendation. The subsequent conversation, in which Lucy appears to speak first with a staff member and then to her own astonishment with the president himself, is handled with the lightest of comic touches. The transcript's phonetic rendering of replicator as the word that convinces Vivian the president is truly on the line is a small but perfect illustration of the show's verbal playfulness. Lucy's triumphant declaration, "Viv, it was him," and Vivian's skeptical, "Are you sure?" set up the final confirmation. Who else in the White House would say replicator? The joke is gentle, affectionate, and entirely in keeping with the series' refusal to mock its characters' aspirations, even while acknowledging their improbability. By the time the appointment is secured for Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, the Sugar Cube White House has completed its metamorphosis. What began as a Cub Scout project has become a presidential audience. What began as a collection of household sugar cubes has become a national offering. And what began as a quiet afternoon of admiration has become the opening movement of a classic Lucy adventure, complete with train travel, logistical nightmares, and the inevitable physical comedy that will follow when the oversized model refuses to fit through a compartment door. Throughout this opening sequence, Lucille Ball's performance, implied by every line of dialogue and every stage direction of the transcript, radiates the particular quality that made her the greatest physical comedienne of her generation. An absolute belief in the reality of the moment, no matter how absurd. When she steps back to admire the finished model, the audience believes that she truly sees a masterpiece. When she decides to telephone the White House, the audience believes that she truly expects to speak to the president. When she secures the appointment, the audience believes that the meeting will occur and that somehow, against all odds, the Sugar Cube White House will arrive intact. That belief is the foundation upon which the entire subsequent comedy rests. Vivian Vance's contribution is equally essential. Her reactions, amused, skeptical, occasionally alarmed, always loyal, provide the necessary counterweight that keeps Lucy's schemes from floating free of all earthly constraint. The partnership between the two women is one of the great comic duos of American television, and this sequence demonstrates why. Lucy proposes the impossible. Vivian registers the impossibility. Lucy proceeds anyway. Vivian follows, muttering, helping, and ultimately sharing in both the disaster and the triumph. The Cub Scouts themselves function as more than mere props. Their questions about the real White House, the monuments, and the president establish the genuine educational and civic spirit that underlies the project. Their delight in the finished model, their eagerness for cookies, and their later excitement about the train journey all serve to remind the audience that the Sugar Cube White House is first and last a children's creation. The adults may expand its significance to presidential proportions, but the object itself remains an expression of boyish enthusiasm and den mother patience. In the broader cultural context of the early 1960s, the sequence resonates with particular force. The Kennedy White House was a symbol of youthful vigor and cultural aspiration. By having ordinary suburban children construct a version of it from sugar cubes, the writers gently democratize that symbol. Anyone, the episode suggests, can participate in the national story, provided they have enough sugar, enough glue, and enough audacity to pick up the telephone and ask for an appointment. That the audacity belongs to Lucy Carmichael is both inevitable and perfect. She is the eternal optimist, the woman who believes that the distance between a Danfield living room and the Oval Office can be bridged by a single telephone call and a carefully constructed gift. The physical comedy that will soon erupt when the model refuses to pass through the train compartment door, when it is later destroyed by careless handling, when Lucy must race across the countryside on horseback to acquire 3,000 replacement cubes is already latent in this opening scene. The Sugar Cube White House is inherently fragile. Its very materiality announces that it cannot survive the ordinary rough and tumble of travel without extraordinary care. Yet Lucy treats it as if it were carved from marble. That discrepancy between the object's actual nature and the importance Lucy assigns to it is the classic engine of sitcom disaster. The audience knows long before the train compartment door proves too narrow that the model is doomed. The pleasure lies in watching Lucy refuse to accept that doom until the very last possible moment, and then with characteristic resourcefulness attempt to reverse it. Thus, the opening sequence accomplishes far more than the mere establishment of a plot premise. It introduces the central comic tension between aspiration and material reality. It showcases the partnership between Lucy and Vivian at its most affectionate and functional. It situates the domestic world of Danfield within the larger national mythology of the Kennedy era. And it prepares the audience for the cascade of physical and logistical catastrophes that will follow, all of them rooted in the simple, beautiful, and utterly impractical decision to build the White House out of sugar cubes. In the hands of a lesser comedienne, the premise might have remained merely cute. In the hands of Lucille Ball, it becomes the first movement of a symphony of chaos, heart, and triumphant absurdity. The last chimney is glued. The model is finished. Everybody steps back, and the adventure already irreversible begins.